Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jel. That was I Be Everywhere by LG DePrice here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Please stay tuned because at noon we will have the news, the weather, and then after a short break, GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. But until then, here is Bank Account by 21 Savage here on 89.5 FM. Thank you so much for listening. That was Roll Up by B.O.B. featuring Marco Penn here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jel. And normally, I do a little show called GameBabble Live, which will be starting after noon, after we do the news and the weather. However, I've been advised to try talking about things that aren't video games, which I'm always a little bit hesitant on because the world is a little bit too politically divided these days. So I've decided to take this half hour before the news and weather and the show starting to talk about how much I hate politics. Oh, I could talk about them, but there are many, many issues with discussing them. And one of the things I want to discuss is the Empire. It's probably a random thing to bring up, but yes, the Empire from Star Wars. See, I've seen a number of articles that, when discussing if we should politicize our discussion of movies, who say, well, Star Wars has always been political. I mean, the Empire has always been sort of a metaphor or a parallel to the Nazis. Okay, they both had stormtroopers, yes, and they were both evil empires, but no, and you really don't want to go down that road. It is a dangerous road to travel. No, do not conflate the Galactic Empire with Nazis. And you're probably saying, well, why? I mean, they're both evil. Yes, but there's a distinct difference beyond just the fact that one is fictional and one was real. That being, well, there's a number of different differences, but I mean, oh, geez, I almost don't even want to say it, but the long and short of it is that, as far as I know, the Galactic Empire never had death camps. They blew up Alderaan, but they didn't have death camps. They didn't kill people just because of how they were born. I do think that's a distinctive difference, and a very important one, but it's a little bit more than that. You see, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there's a lot of people who like dressing up as stormtroopers and Darth Vader, and like, pretending to be Imperial soldiers. Because that's sort of one of the fun things about fictional villains. It's fun to be a fictional villain. It's fun to pretend to be evil. When you play cops and robbers, someone's got to be the cop and someone's got to be the robber. And some people, they really get invested in going, but what about the villains? There are people who enjoy being the Empire. There are people who enjoy being Decepticons. There are people who enjoy being Cobra. And as such, it is very dangerous and stupid to try to conflate the two. Shoot, when I was at Anime STL, there was this big old, they had a booth. There was a St. Louis branch of the Galactic Empire cosplay group. And they do a bunch of charity things and stuff. But they like going all in on their Imperial cosplay and, really being stormtroopers and the like. And it's that's fun. But when you start saying that the Empire, the Galactic Empire from Star Wars, has always just basically been the Nazis, but in space, you start walking down a dangerous road. For starters, you start saying that the people who like the Empire, who enjoy pretending to be them, well, you start saying that they're essentially fans of Nazis, and that makes a few people uncomfortable and makes them say, actually, what's more, because people enjoy exploring, what's the deal with the villains, you start finding out that there's supplemental or fan material, especially extended universe stuff, that goes into more detail about what the Galactic Empire is all about, what their ideology is, why they do what they do, why people would work for the Galactic Empire. And when you start conflating, Nazis and the Galactic Empire, you start maybe making people a little sympathetic towards Nazis. And that gets uncomfortable now, doesn't it? So, it's generally a thing you want to avoid. But then you get the people who go all in on their political stupidity. And they will basically say that the First Order from the new films are... God, I hate even mentioning this. They say things, and I've seen people write stuff like this, like saying, oh, well, the First Order is basically Trump voters. The First Order is basically Republican. You realize, like, nearly half the country is Republican? You realize people did vote for Trump. You really want to say, hey, about half the country, you are our cartoonish villains. You want to go down that road? You really want to, like, insult a chunk of your potential viewers that way? And, again, it winds up blurring this line, the line that shouldn't be blurred. There's a huge difference between fantasy and reality, between fictional, cackling villainy and the real freaking world and actual political ideologies. And when you decide to overly politicize your discussion of fiction, you run the risk of blurring that line, muddling things, and it can turn into a bit of a problem. You run the risk of making Nazis cool and desirable, and no one should want to do that. Ever. That is a terrible idea. Even if that's not what you intend to do, you could. And that is today's reason why I freaking hate politics and don't like overly politicizing things. Unfortunately, things will get a smidgy bit political on today's GameBabble, but not too terribly much. There's a thing that needs to be addressed, and I'm very angry about it. But it will be after we get done talking about some far more fun and enjoyable things on today's show. Either way, that wraps up today's episode of Jell Hates Politics. Moving right along, here is Lemon Eyes by Meg Myers, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. And when we get back at noon, we will have the news, the weather, and, after a short break, GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. I hope you will stick around for that. But even if you don't, here's Lemon Eyes by Meg Meyer on 89.5 FM. Thank you so much for listening. Currently, it is 21 degrees here on the campus of Florissant Valley Community College. I'm Jell with your noon news update. In local news, the attorney for the man whose ex-wife had an affair with Missouri Governor Eric Greitens says his client is being subpoenaed by a grand jury. The man who secretly recorded his wife's admission of the 2015 affair with Greitens is being asked to testify. The St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office says it is investigating the 2015 affair, which also includes allegations that Greitens threatened to blackmail the woman he was having an affair with. Greitens' attorney says the governor has not heard from law enforcement on the issue. A man facing charges for shooting a woman in Alton was arrested in Houston. Darnell Johnson was arrested yesterday by U.S. Marshals. The 44-year-old is charged with attempted first-degree murder and aggravated battery with a firearm. Police say he shot a woman in the face during a domestic dispute in January. And the state is denying an application for a methadone clinic in St. Charles County. KMOV reports the application for a planned opioid addiction treatment center was denied after months of pushback against it. Its opening from neighbors. A petition against the clinic gathered more than 200 signatures. The treatment facility was scheduled to open this month in a strip mall in St. Charles County. In national news, emergency crews are working to free people trapped in rubble after a powerful 6.4 magnitude earthquake hit off the coast of Taiwan. It has toppled buildings in the eastern city of Hualien. There are social media pictures of mass damage. There is a report of a hotel collapse. No word on death or injuries yet. U.S. stocks seesaw as the major indexes try to rebound from a recent sell-off. The Dow Jones Industrial Average opened 500 points lower today, but soon rose as much as 367 points before retreating again. This comes a day after the Dow fell nearly 1,200 points, around 4%. The clock is ticking as the government runs out of money late Thursday, and fears of a government shutdown are growing. In a Capitol briefing today, GOP House Speaker Paul Ryan touted a 6-week funding extension with a full year of funding for the military. Ryan accused Democrats of holding the military hostage over the unrelated issue of immigration. And SpaceX CEO Elon Musk is hoping his company's Falcon Heavy rocket launch goes as planned today at Kennedy Space Center. The first test flight of Falcon Heavy is targeted for 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time today, and Musk says it's, quote, guaranteed to be exciting one way or another. The 230-foot-tall rocket features 3 boosters and 27 engines, and SpaceX says it will be the most powerful operational rocket in the world by a factor of 2. Also, St. Louis Community College is partnering with the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis, Inc., the Salvation Army this Friday, February 9th from 4 to 7 p.m. for an open house at the Ferguson Community Empowerment Center at 9420 West Florissant, St. Louis, Missouri, 63136. Meet with college representatives to discover how STLCC can help you with enrollment, financial aid, advising, early college programs, and short-term in-demand training programs at little to no cost. For more information, contact Janice Fitzgerald at 314-513-4238 or by email at fvadmissions@stlcc.edu. Hope to see you there at the Ferguson Community Empowerment Center, Friday, February 9th from 4 to 7. That concludes the news. Now, on to the weather. Let's see, today, we've got clouds in the morning. It's going to be sunny later on. High of 27, low of 18. Egad, it is cold today. Thankfully, this is the coldest day for a while. Tomorrow, it will be partly cloudy. High of 30, low of 18. It's still pretty cold. A little bit of a warm-up, though, on Thursday. Mostly sunny. High of 48, low of 31. Then things get partly cloudy on Friday with a high of 43, low of 24. And we've got rain and snow showers on Saturday with a high of 45, low of 18. And that about describes what's looking like the rest of this next week. And so is that we will be floating in the 40s, highs of 40s, lows of 30s. So cold enough that you can't have fun, but not cold enough for snow for the most part, unless it's wavering between the two. It's ridiculous. The weather is ridiculous. Welcome to February in Missouri. Anyway, that concludes the news and weather here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Again, currently it is about 21 degrees here on Florissant Valley Community College. I'm Jell. This has been your noon news update. But please stay tuned because we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll be GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. But until then, here's Hold On by Fivefold. Enjoy, and thank you so much for listening. That was Hold On by Fivefold here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, we like to kick the show off by talking about what games have come out this week, what's coming out next week, as well as what anime are in theaters, because I think that needs a little bit of a push, because they generally tend to be, how do I put this? They generally tend to be, like, one-day-only obscure events that don't get nearly enough push, so I give them a little help. Anyway, today on PlayStation 4, what did we get? Well, Armored Warfare is out, which is some kind of free-to-play tank MMO, sort of like World of Tanks, but not. Also, Black Hole Complete Edition, Bleed 2, Dandara, Dragon Sinker, which is a retro-style RPG from Kemco, a port of one of their iPhone and Android monthly RPGs they like to do. Heroin Anthem Zero Episode 1, which that one wound up being very interesting. It's apparently made in China, and it is a sort of Vanillaware wannabe side-scrolling hack-and-slash RPG. Looks pretty fun, although weirdly, it does not have a female lead. It has a male character, even though it's called Heroine Anthem. So I don't know what's up with the name, but it looks super fun. I think I might just pick that up, depending on what price it is. There's also a game called Marooners, which is some kind of goofy party game. That's coming to both PS4 and Xbox One. Mercenary Kings Reloaded Edition, which is sort of a Metal Slug Contra-y game. The regular edition has been out pretty much since the PS4 launch, but I guess they added a bunch of content and they're reselling it. Middle-earth Shadow of War Blade of Galadriel I guess that's an expansion for Middle-earth Shadow of War game I did not pick up. Shadow of the Colossus Special Edition, though, hey, it's Shadow of the Colossus, but they redid it, so it's all, like, super extra pretty, and, like, yeah. So if you're a fan of Shadow of the Colossus, that's the thing. On the 8th, a game called Aegis Defenders comes out, and on Friday, we get The Seven Deadly Sins Knights of Britannia, which is sort of a fighting game, little bit of RPG based on the anime that's on Netflix, along with Under Night in Birth EXE Latest, which is a fantastic 2D fighter from the makers of Melty Blood. Very anime style, beautiful high-res 2D sprites. I just found the character designs overwhelmingly boring, but people love the game. They say it's a very, very good game. So I'll take their word for it on that one. Moving on, Xbox One is getting Dandara Marooners, Mercenary Kings Reloaded Edition, and Middle-earth Shadow of War Blade of Galadriel, along with tomorrow, DYE, Little Triangle, and Pinstripe, and on Friday, Bleed 2, Overdriven Reloaded Special Edition, Quantic Pinball, and Starpoint Gemini Warlords. Moving on, Nintendo Switch today is getting Black Hole Dandara and Mercenary Kings Reloaded Edition. Tomorrow it gets Darkside Detective. And then, day after tomorrow, Thursday, Arcade Archives Neo Geo 2020 Super Baseball, which Super Baseball 2020 is actually, it's a baseball game with awesome robots. It's very nice. Aegis Defenders, Aperion Cyberstorm, Arcade Archives Crazy Climber, Atomic Run Gun Jump Gun, Disc Jam, which is what's the word here? Windjammers clone. It is a 3D Windjammers clone, and Mercenary Saga Chronicles, which, if I recall, is a turn-based strategy game that's supposed to be really good. And then on Friday, a Switch port of Dragon Quest Builders comes out. However, most excitingly, on Thursday in Japan, a little bit of a break to talk about Japan here, GameBabble comes out, which, no sign of a U.S. release yet. I expect it to get a U.S. release, but I'm not waiting. GameBabble is a story-driven heavy metal drumming game involving schoolgirls fighting aliens, and it is being spearheaded by none other than Tak Fuji, as in the guy from the Konami press conference who once said, "This is not an ordinary hack-and-slash title. This is an extreme hack-and-slash title. And that if you press XXXYYY, XXXYYY, you will be sucked." That guy. He's behind GameBabble, and I cannot think of a more appropriate place for him to be. Super excited to give the game a shot. Moving right along, though, 3DS isn't getting anything this week, but it's got stuff next week. This week on Vita, though, Dragon Sinker and Mercenary Kings Reloaded Edition, along with Under Night in Birth EXE Latest. Moving on, next week, oh my goodness, the PlayStation 4 is getting Crossing Souls along with Dynasty Warriors 9, which is going to be a huge shakeup for the Dynasty Warriors series. It's supposed to be an actual open-world, free-roaming, free-form Dynasty Warriors game. Looks very pretty, very exciting, but I remember the last time Dynasty Warriors tried to have a big shakeup, and that was Dynasty Warriors 6, and that was a disaster. So I am very, very, very wary about Dynasty Warriors 9, especially because Zhang He will not have claws, and what the heck is the point of a Dynasty Warriors if my boy Zhang He doesn't have his claws? Moving on, Kingdom Come Deliverance is also coming out. Monster Energy Supercross, the official game. Owlboy, which is an indie platformer that has made a big splash on PC. A lot of people loved it. Very beautiful. Been in development for a long, long time. And now it's starting to get its console release. A lot of people say very positive things about Owlboy, so you might want to give that a look. Also a game called Pinstripe. Pop-Up Pilgrims, which is a PlayStation VR game about helping 2D characters navigate a 3D world. I don't know, it might be kind of Lemmings-ish. Anyway, Also, South Park The Stick of Truth is apparently being ported to PS4, because why not? Along with The Fall Part 2 Unbound, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege Advanced Edition, and the second physical release of Wonder Boy The Dragon's Trap, a remake of Wonder Boy 3, featuring both retro and modernized graphics. It's been out digitally for a while, but now it's going to get another physical release. And speaking of physical releases, Secret of Mana PS4 comes out on the 15th. It will have a physical release. The physical release will be very limited, but you will be able to purchase it digitally as well. And on the 16th, a game called F.E. Yeah. Anyway, Xbox One, what are you getting? Xbox One is getting Dynasty Warriors 9, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Monster Energy Supercross the official game, Owlboy, South Park Stick of Truth, The Fall 2 Unbound, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege Advanced Edition, as well as on the 14th, The Story Goes On, and F.E. Or F.E. or whatever. Nintendo Switch next week is getting Monster Energy Supercross the official video game, Owlboy, The Fall Part 2 Unbound, The Longest 5 Minutes, Wonder Boy, The Dragon's Trap. It is also getting Torque L Physics Modified Edition, Zeo Drifter, Fee, and on the 16th, it is getting Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2 with Bayonetta. Apparently, Bayonetta 2 will be on the physical cartridge, and if you buy the physical cartridge, you get like a download of the original Bayonetta. I think that's how it works. Also, is that next week? That's the following week. Okay. Moving on, 3DS next week is getting Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology, which, they need to port that to more things, because the 3DS is drying up, and Radiant Historia was an amazing game. You want to talk about being way too late to the party. Radiant Historia was a DS game. Phenomenal turn-based RPG, looked beautiful, great writing, and the central concept was that there were multiple branching paths, a lot of choices made differences, but a lot of those differences ended in a lot of people dying. So you had the ability to, at certain points, roll back time and try to fix your mistakes in order to eventually get to the good ending. And I know some people saw that as a cop-out, but it was so well written that it really worked out. Fantastic turn-based battle system. Like, maybe later in the show I should talk about turn-based battle systems, because there are the boring turn-based battle systems, and then there's the ones that actually make you think about your character placement, what moves you use, and Radiant Historia had one of those. So it is so good to see that game back again. Also, the PlayStation Vita next week is getting The Longest 5 Minutes and Secret of Mana. That concludes our games for this week and next week. What anime are hitting theaters? Well, good news, if you have not seen Mary and the Witch's Flower yet, it is still going to be there until Thursday at the Mills. I guess Thursdays is when they, update their movie listings, which is why, just like last week, I said it would be there until Thursday. All I can see into is Thursday, but they are saying until Thursday at the Mills, Mary and the Witch's Flower will still be there. If you haven't seen it, it is a movie. It is the first movie by Studio Ponak, which is made of a bunch of ex-Studio Ghibli people who decide to strike out on their own and prove they can make great movies too, and it looks very Ghibli-esque. It is, in fact, based on an old Western-written book, much like a lot of Studio Ghibli films actually are, and looks like a good time. And yeah, that one actually has regular hours instead of being one of these one-showing wonders. Speaking of one-showing wonders, yesterday was the subtitled version of Eureka 7 High Evolution. Tomorrow will be the dub for Eureka 7 High Evolution. So if you're interested in seeing a Eureka 7 movie in theaters dubbed, that's tomorrow. Also, Mazinger Z Infinity, February 11th and 12th. I am way too excited about that. Because it's Mazinger Z. It's the definitive original super robot. I think there were some before him. I mean, does Gigantor count as a super robot? I don't know. But anyway, Mazinger Z is the most definitive super robot. The movie looks great. I can't wait to watch it. And yeah, that's what anime are in theaters and so on. Although I did see that in March, March 12th or 13th or something, there will be a movie based on the competitive swimming anime Free that will be in theaters. But we will get to that when we get to that. That's what we got for anime in theaters. Get excited for that. Yeah. That wraps that up. So we are going to take a short little break, and when we get back, we will talk about more video game news and information with some interesting announcements, some fascinating upcoming games, and then I will complain about a thing that has me absolutely steamed later on in the show. But until then, here is Ayo by Sa Leon, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much. That was Do Ya Own by Louis V, Shorty the Kid, and Loudy here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. Earlier we had our new game releases and what anime are in theaters. Now it is time for news, and let's start with the best news. Space Channel 5 VR, our Arcada Dancing show, has been announced. Space Channel 5 in VR. Yes, very yes. It is exactly what it sounds like. You're in VR and you play Space Channel 5. Apparently it will be demoed at the Nico Tokaigi 2018, and we'll later see releases on something. It is currently developed on Vive, so a PC release is pretty much confirmed, for Vive at least. But I would think that a PSVR version would happen, but at the same time, Galgun VR still doesn't have a PSVR version, so it's all up in the air. Moving right along, Puyo Puyo Tetris will be coming to PCs on February 27th. It will have a Japanese voice option, unlike its console counterparts. Unfortunately, it will have de nouveau. And the thing that I find most interesting about this is the fact that, of all things, the PC is the last system to get Puyo Puyo Tetris. Do you know what else Puyo Puyo Tetris has been released on? We got on Switch and PS4 in America and the rest of the world. But in Japan, Puyo Puyo Tetris is available on 3DS, Wii U, PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, and Xbox One. So, yeah, and now PC. The last on the list. This should give you an idea of the Japanese mindset when it comes to PC gaming. Moving on, Dynasty Warriors 9 has apparently uploaded a video to show off its map size. It apparently takes 1 hour and 40 minutes to traverse the entire Dynasty Warriors 9 map from the upper left to lower right-hand corner. And, yeah, that's pretty big. Does not mean the game will be good, and that's what I'm concerned about. As I mentioned earlier, I love Dynasty Warriors very deeply, mostly because Zhang He and claws, so the fact that there's no Zhang He with claws in this game kind of annoys me. And the last time Zhang He didn't have his claws, we got Dynasty Warriors 6, which was a dumpster fire. I am very concerned about how Dynasty Warriors 9 will turn out, but you will see when it gets here. Thank goodness I'm hoping I can rent it. I would like to rent it. I'm very, very wary about Dynasty Warriors 9, but it looks beautiful. I'm just on the fence. We'll see how it is. Moving right along, though, the PlayStation 4 system update 5.50 will be coming out eventually. We've got a new update coming out, and it's going to be like an actual big one, not just, we made some tweaks and improved some, fixed some bugs. No, this one will have things like playtime management, where parents will be able to see how long their various kids have played PlayStation 4, and be able to track that. They'll be adding new PlayStation Plus tabs and this PS4 tabs, and the option to hide various apps. There will be enhancements to the quick menu. You'll be able to listen to background music on PlayStation Now. You'll be able to do more with notifications. You'll be able to import custom wallpapers via USB, a custom tournament team page, super sampling mode on PS4 Pro, all sorts of good times. Moving right along, Yakuza 6, unfortunately, has been delayed until April 17th. Final Fantasy 12, The Zodiac Age is out on PC. Forgot to mention that, so if you've never given Final Fantasy 12 a chance, and you like slightly MMO-ish RPGs, but better, Final Fantasy 12 The Zodiac Age is a really good time. I like it. Final Fantasy 12 is one of my favorite Final Fantasies, okay? For me, it's like, cripes, like 1, Famicom version of 3, little bit of a soft spot for 4, Crystal Chronicles, and then, like, 12 are, like, some of my favorites. I have weird taste in Final Fantasies. Moving on, Red Dead Redemption 2 will be coming out October 26th, and yet we haven't really seen too terribly much of it. Mildly disconcerting. Also, they are saying that Sonic is going to take South by Southwest by storm. South by Southwest is a video game conference thing. It's been a little iffy in recent years, but apparently they will be showing a new Sonic game at it, and that will be early March. I want to say March 9th, March 12th, something like that. Also, Dragon Ball FighterZ, as you can probably tell from Twitch if you've even looked on there at all, it is the fastest Dragon Ball game to ship 2 million units. It is doing very well. People are loving it. I'm loving watching people love it because I'm not that good at it. But yeah, that game is so fun to watch, seriously. Even if you don't care about Dragon Ball, hit up Twitch, click Dragon Ball FighterZ, watch some of the players with the most views playing it online against people. It is a blast. I'm especially loving it whenever Lythero streams, because he has been playing Android 16 and just doing Kill Goku runs. It's been very amusing. So, yeah, that's most of what I've been doing this week. Watch people play Dragon Ball FighterZ. It's so fun. But more than that, we have some DLC information that is 90% confirmed. Basically, base Vegeta, Cooler, and probably base Goku will be DLC characters. How do we know this? Well, base Vegeta will have a different character model. He actually has the shoulder pads and the monkey tail wrapped around him like a belt. So, like how he looked when he first showed up in the series, that's what base Vegeta looks like. We know this because we have, hackers have found the model. They've been able to make the model playable. You can watch videos of it on YouTube, but they do not have the move set for it. Okay? We just have the model. We don't know how he'll play, but the fact that that model is there pretty much confirms base Vegeta is going to be one of the DLC characters. People have also been able to make base Goku playable, finding his model, but the thing is, his model's already in the game, because, it's what he looks like before he goes Super Saiyan in his intro sequence, not to mention a bunch of story mode. So, that doesn't confirm base Goku, but considering base Vegeta is confirmed, base Goku is probably confirmed. More than that, though, Cooler will likely be our third DLC character. We have not found any character models, so we don't know what form of Cooler. But we have found an announcer file, which is like the file for when you select them on the character select screen that says their name. We found the one where they say Cooler. So, very high probability of Cooler. Vegeta 100%. Okay, we're going to say Vegeta 90% confirmed. Cooler 75% confirmed. And base Goku 50% confirmed. Just pulling numbers out of my butt. Moving on, the Mario movie by Illumination Studios will be co-produced by Shigeru Miyamoto himself, the creator of Mario, which will hopefully prevent it from being awful. It's still Illumination. We don't know. I'd like to have a little faith in Illumination. They've made a lot of movies where they're like, Herder, here's another knockoff of the Minions, but maybe they can make something worthwhile. Even still, having Goombas that act like Minions won't be the worst thing in the world, especially when they get stepped on. Moving on, Mario Kart Tour is announced for smartphones and will be out before March 2019. Yeah, that's a bit of a gap there. Obviously, it's what Nintendo said to their investors. It's basically saying, it's in development, we'll get it out before next year. Okay. Speaking of coming out before next year, Sirento will be hitting PlayStation VR before next Christmas. For those of you unfamiliar, Sirento is currently one of the best looking playing virtual reality games out there. Been out on PC. Pretty much, you play a ninja with a grappling hook, and you chop things up with a katana, and you throw shurikens, and you do awesome things. And there's like robo-geishas, and you chop them in half, and it looks super fun. And to the point where one of my friends who doesn't give a crap about VR When I said I'm going to do a VR stream, he was like, do you have Sirento? And I'm like, what the heck is that? It's a cool ninja game. Okay, cool. But yeah, no, it will be coming to PlayStation VR, but it will likely be March 2019. Or not March 2019. Yeah, reading things wrong. It will be before next Christmas, so little bit of a wait there. But we'll see how it goes. Also, the online for Nintendo Switch will be in September. For those of you unfamiliar, the Nintendo Switch will have paid online. It will cost significantly less than the online for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and stuff, but it will be paid. But in exchange, we will be getting, like, free virtual console games. And that's been the thing people have most been excited about, is virtual console launches with the online service. Why Nintendo is delaying the virtual console until the online service starts up, I don't know. Clearly, developers are itching to put their games on virtual console, and I hope that we get a flood of virtual console games to reflect this. One of the things that's always annoyed me with the Nintendo Virtual Console is that releases have been relatively slow, and they've never really gotten that big of a library. They've gotten pretty big, but not as big as they could be. But I'm hoping with the Switch that, like, every developer under the sun will say, please dump all our old games on your system, thank you. But we'll see when it gets here. We will see when it gets here. Meanwhile, Star Wars Battlefront 2, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, it is considered a flop for selling only 7 million copies, and thus they will indeed be reinstating the microtransactions. Yes, only 7 million copies. Apparently, the first EA Star Wars Battlefront sold 15 million copies. Does anyone remember when million seller was like a milestone? Like on the GameCube, they had the million sellers, and they got little like gold bar at the top, and they were sold at a lower price, and they got re-released. It's like, hey, it's a million seller release. Anyone remember that? Remember when video games made money when they sold 1 million copies? I remember. Most people remember. Because you shouldn't need to sell 8 million copies to break even. If you're doing that, you are doing something very wrong. And oh, buddy, we will continue that line of discussion later in the show, because it has gotten funny. Things are getting funny on that front. So yeah, we will continue that later. I need to figure out how I'm going to read that. So yeah, that is what is going on in terms of video game news. We are going to take a short break now, and when we return, slightly after 1, we will discuss... Well, we'll go ahead and discuss that. We'll go ahead and discuss what is going on with loot boxes, microtransactions, the cost of game development, and oh so many people scrambling to the defense of AAA companies that might maybe need to rethink their business plan or go out of business. 'Cause, yeah. Really, you lost money at 7 million sold. You're doing it wrong. Wow, my mind is blown. Anyway, here's Rise by Stillline here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for more GameBabble. That was Find You by Nick Jonas here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. Anyway, so before the break, I mentioned that Star Wars Battlefront 2 is considered a flop for selling only 7 million copies. And that this might be a sign that someone is doing it wrong. Or lying, one or the other. And honestly, when it comes to EA, I could believe either of them. Now, I ranted about this on the show last time about how I really felt that modern video game companies are doing things absolutely, positively wrong. But, yeah, interestingly, there are some people, especially in game journalism, who have connections to the industry, desperately trying to defend this crap. And it is really pathetic. It becomes so clear that so many game journalists are just being used as puppets by big-name companies, especially with their recent push for, single-player gaming is over. There's no market for single-player games. It's too expensive to make single-player games, which is complete BS, and that's what I complained about last time. But this time, none other than Extra Credits has come in to try to defend overpriced games, and the results have been hilarious. Extra Credits is a long-running show by someone who actually does teach game design and is very closely related with the industry, and they recently did a video called Why Video Games Should Cost More Than $60, saying, they should be like $70, $80, $90. But they admitted no one would actually pay that, and that's why they need microtransactions, why they need loot boxes. And what I love, what made me so happy, what restored my faith in humanity, if only for a minute, was the fact that if you scroll down to the comments on that video, literally every single person on the planet said the same thing. Why don't you just make the games cheaper? If you can't make money off of a $60 game sale, you're spending too much money making your game. You've done something wrong. If you need millions of copies to sell in order to break even, you screwed up. But they decided to address this concern and make another video talking about the high cost of making video games, where they outlined what the general prices of what game development costs these days. And they got the same response of, your plan is bloated. Like, they were mentioning, apparently, and this blows my mind, apparently Assassin's Creed Black Flag had 900 people working on it, with an average salary of about $10,000 per, I forget exactly what it was. But yeah, they had a massive staff. And a lot of games these days have staffs of like 500 people or 300 people, and you don't need that many people making your game. This is where the problem is. It's like, okay, like, they were also saying, you need to pay for the building, and you gotta buy the computers. It's like, okay, no, that's infrastructure. That's laid out already if you've already established your company. You don't need to buy computers again, not for a little bit at least. And, yeah, like, and companies will find ways to sneak around having to pay their dues. Apparently there's a lot of video game developers who find ways around their taxes, and I even heard about how apparently one developer, in order to prevent having to pay the health benefits, would, like, actually fire people. Like, they'd hire people, and then they would fire them before they have to pay for their health benefits. That was in QA where they would do this, because, like, as long as they kept it under a certain number, they wouldn't have to pay the health benefits. It was, big companies will pull scammy BS anyway to get out of paying what they need to pay, but above all, you don't need that many hundreds of people making your game. Unless you are, I guess, a big AAA studio, in which case you wouldn't spend that much money to make a game unless your game already made that much money. Because that's the thing. Apparently, like, Assassin's Creed draws in ridiculous amounts of money, and so they spend ridiculous amounts of money making new Assassin's Creed. That's how it works. But yes, if you poorly manage your budget on a AAA game, it can completely sink your studio, and it has sunk studios because they spent too much money making their games. The number one argument against this entire thing has been Nier Automata. Nier Automata was apparently budgeted in such a way that only 200,000 copies needed to sell for it to break even. The developers outright did not expect it to sell 1 million. It has apparently sold at least 2 million copies now, which is far, far below Star Wars Battlefront's 7 million copies, and yet it is considered the game that saved the company. It saved Platinum Games. They were going to go out of business. But then Nier Automata happened, and Nier Automata sold enough and was made on a proper budget, so that way it saved the company, and now they're back in business. They've got all sorts of crazy plans for the future. They just, they needed that game to sell, and it did, and it did great at $2 million. And many people are calling it their game of the year, and it is not an ugly-looking game. Seriously, look up some footage of Nier Automata. It's rather pretty. Yeah, not as pretty as Star Wars Battlefront 2, but if the difference in graphics between Nier Automata and Star Wars Battlefront 2 is the difference between 2 million copies sold, the company is saved, and 7 million copies sold, we're going bankrupt. I know EA isn't going bankrupt, but still, if that's the difference between the two, maybe we need to scale it back a little. And it's occurring to me just how bad this whole thing is getting. See, here's one of the things you need to understand. AAA gaming is a modern invention. It started pretty much with the 360. And I know a lot of people, I think I mentioned this last week, I know a lot of people will say, well, I remember some kind of AAA games from like the PS1 era. Oh, like what? Oh, like Final Fantasy VII and Resident Evil 2. Uh-huh. Notice that they all have numbers after them. That's important. Because the proper way to make a game is you do a first game at a medium budget. So that way, if it flops, oh well, no big deal. You throw different game concepts out there, see what people bite. Resident Evil 1 was certainly not a AAA game, but people bought it, people loved it, and Capcom said, looks like we've got a winner on our hands. Now, let's spend more money on a sequel, put more staff on it, listen to what fans liked and didn't like about the previous game, try to clean it up, make the sequel better than the original, and they made Resident Evil 2, which, for the record, I actually hate Resident Evil 2, but I'm not going to deny that it is a game that a lot of time and money and effort went into, and people who aren't me loved the game. And it was pretty close to a AAA game for its era. And, same thing with Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy already had an installed player base, and so they built a game and hyped a game based around that player base, based around what they knew they were going to be able to sell. And that's the way you make games. You make cheaper, smaller first games and then bigger second games. But weirdly, people are afraid of doing that, even though technically people are like, oh, well, game development costs so much more. No. Making the detailed character models that consoles are capable of displaying, that's what costs more. Because the more detail there is in a character model or in an environment and so on, yes, the more money that costs. But if you don't put that much into the details, it's not that bad. I mean, look at the friggin' indie game explosion going on right now. That's a sign of how much easier and cheaper it is to make games than it's possibly ever been before. I need to look up what it is, but I think you can get started with Unity for free, and then you, pay for the license later when you actually start selling your game or something. It is so much cheaper and easier to make games now, and you can make some pretty incredible games without breaking the bank if you know how to budget things properly. Which actually brings me to something I find very interesting. Because a lot of people have been saying that, Japan made a comeback in 2017. Yeah, because they were the only ones not dropping the ball with microtransactions. All the big budget AAA games that usually make those Game of the Year lists, they all shoehorned in microtransactions that pissed people off. Meanwhile, Japan was just making games to sell in Japan. That's one of the things we forget about. And that's actually one of the things that has been saving Japan. See, back in the 360 PS3 generation, Japanese companies kept trying to cater to a Western audience. And a lot of people think that that's a good thing. That's what they should do. No. Because Japan doesn't know what a Western audience likes, and the Western audience doesn't know what Japan likes. Last time a Western developer tried to make a game specifically for Japan, they named the game Great. I'm talking, of course, about Sudeki, which, yes, was originally named Suteki, which is like the Japanese word for great. And everyone in Japan was like, that's dumb. You're treating the word great like it's a mystical power in the name of the world. In the world of great, the great power was really great. It was really dumb, and they got made fun of. And, I have a little bit of a soft spot for Sudeki, but it was flagrantly a Western company trying to make a game for a Japanese audience and not exactly succeeding. It was mildly embarrassing. And when a Japanese developer tries to make a game for a Western audience, you get things like Ninja Gaiden 3 and Metroid Other M, which, yes, I believe they've actually said Other M's stupid melodramatic storytelling was designed for what they thought a Western audience wanted. It's very hard to develop a game for a culture that you are not a part of. So don't. Make the game for what you understand. Sell it to other people. We buy Japanese games because we like Japanese games. We buy American games because we like American games. That's the way it works. And now Japan has finally realized their folly in trying to chase the 3 million selling Western AAA game thing. And now they're just making games for Japan. And here's the thing with Japan, kind of a small country, all things considered. Like, the country of Japan's about the size of California, a little bigger. You know, you don't really think about that. Just in terms of space, just living space where people can live. America is a bigger country, and we do now have a much larger gaming demographic than Japan does. In the past, it was different, and that was due to a number of cultural factors. But now, America has more people playing video games. We're a bigger market. Japan is a relatively small market. And so, when you make a game for Japan to sell Japan numbers, you are budgeting and designing a game to make money while selling less than 1 million copies. Games selling 1 million copies in Japan is, like, unbelievable. Okay, so when you do that, you wind up with properly budgeted games is what you wind up with. But I've been looking at these, and I'm like, what are these companies doing? And I've noticed a recurring theme, and that is submitting ideas. See, way back when, a couple years ago, Creates, the makers of a lot of side-scrolling games, they get, like, farmed out to make. They made Mega Man's 9 and 10. They made the Mega Man ZX and Zero series. I think they might have worked on some Castlevanias. I know they worked on Mighty Number 9. They also contributed a smidge to Shantae, but not a whole lot. I think it was mostly art assets because someone on staff was a fan. But Creates, they're pretty much, their bread and butter was being farmed out to make platformers. They just made Blaster Master Zero, for example. This is what Creates does. And a while back, they were like, well, crap, Capcom just canceled the Mega Man series. We have nothing to make. So they were like, everyone in the company, submit an idea on a piece of paper, send it in, we'll come up with something. You know, like, give us a sentence. And one guy wrote, I was playing House of the Dead the other day, and I thought this game would be so much better if it was cute schoolgirls chasing after me. And they looked at that idea and they said, brilliant, and they made Galgun. That was how that game came about. But I bring this up because, believe it or not, this seems to be a thing, because CyberConnect 2 is doing the exact same thing with their Vengeance series, which is a news story I want to cover. Let me see if I can pull it up, because this is way too much information for me to just copy down. Where is their Vengeance series? I'm just sort of scrolling through Silicon Era here. But what CyberConnect 2, the makers of the .hack series, and they made a bunch of the Naruto games, they've been licensed out. They've been licensed out to make a bunch of games, and they were previously working closely with Square Enix on the Final Fantasy VII remake, which was going to be much more actiony. And Square Enix just cut them loose, so I think they're sort of sitting there going, well, crap, there goes our big money-making thing. What do we do now? And at the same time, they want to hire new staff. So what they did, they started the Next Plan 3 Vengeance game project, where they had everyone on staff submit ideas for games. They had over 100. They whittled it down to 3, and they're announcing the games. They're just barely entering development now. And they're like, yeah, we're going to we're going to push these games, and we're going to say, hey, we're developing these games. Who wants to join our company to help work on them? It's part of their mass recruitment plan. And I'm like, you know what? That is not the worst idea. Certainly a way to get people interested. And let's talk about the 3 games. Oh yeah, and the other thing is they're saying they want these games to be developed at a low cost. They will be low-cost games developed in a short time frame. So they are very much, I guess, what you would call incubator projects. We're going to make some small, cheap games, throw them out there, see what connects with people. First and foremost, the one that has me most interested is Fugu of the Battlefield, a.k.a. Fuga, which is an action strategy RPG set in the Tail Concerto Solito Robo universe. It takes place a little bit before then, when things were significantly less happy. And it is about 11 war orphans piloting a giant ancient superweapon tank that, apparently it requires a life sacrifice to fire its gigantic cannon. That's gonna be a happy game. And yeah, apparently you have to pay attention to, like, the feelings of the characters as you assign them to different jobs in their giant house tank. Let's see, the next game they've got is Tokyo Ogre Gate, which is a high-speed parkour slashing action game set in a fantasy world inspired by post-World War I Japan, I guess pre-World War II. Main character Toako speeds up as she slashes through enemies. The faster she's going, the higher her damage output is. The game will shift from side-scrolling to front-scrolling and back-scrolling at times, showing off CyberConnect 2's well-known dynamic scene changes. I'm just now reading the press releases, because admittedly, Fuga is the only one I was really closely paying attention to. Project is popular with the staff because it's... actually said this. The project is popular with the staff because it is very try-hard edgy in the way they love. The kanji for Tokyo is even that of sword and evil. Okay. And then we've got Cecile, which is about 4 sisters who hate each other and fight to take each other's hearts. It is a 2.5D side-scrolling action game with the main character Cecile fighting with an umbrella and unique animations. Project was sent in by a young developer, and Matsuyama wants to put them and other young developers in the spotlight with these sort of projects. Okay, whatever, but this is what I'm talking about. They're like, okay, we'll have a game about cat and dog people piloting a tank for vengeance, and we'll have a schoolgirl in post-World War I Japan chopping up enemies to make her go faster, and we'll have warring gothic Lolita sisters stealing each other's hearts. Yeah, those are good projects, and if nothing else, they're interesting, and one of those could become a huge success, and then they start making, then they make a sequel with a larger budget that's flashier and all sorts of awesome, but that's how you do it, and I'm surprised AAA game developers aren't doing things like this. It seems like such an obvious thing. Yes, fine, have your couple hundred staff members going off and making your yearly games that everyone expects that are big budget, but can't you take, like, a team of 40, split them off, and, say, hey, you guys, work on something crazy. Can't you have people on your staff submit game concepts, get a smaller team together, sell it at a lower price, make it at a lower budget, and see what sticks? Because something's gotta stick, something's gotta appeal to someone, and that's how we're getting, this was one of the things that has really annoyed people about the extra credits thing. People are like, well, what about PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or Stardew Valley, or Minecraft? It's like, oh, those are lightning in a bottle. Yes and no. I mean, yeah, they're lightning in a bottle that's, no one really expected any of those games to be as big a success as they are. But you can only capture lightning in a bottle if you make more interesting bottles. I don't know. But all of those are smaller, independently-ish developed games ish in the case of PlayerUnknown's Battleground. I don't understand that game. But they're these smaller, independently developed games that, happen to catch some people's eyes. No, you can't recreate that, intentionally. You can't go, well, I'm gonna make the next Minecraft and actually make the next Minecraft. No, the only way you can do that is by trying new things, trying experimental things, taking risks. And yes, it is impossible to take risks on a game that costs millions of dollars to develop and needs a staff of 900 people, but that's why you do smaller projects. And wouldn't that look so good at E3? Because all the big companies, they have their big stage presentation, and let's just be blunt, a lot of people, it's like, really? You're just going to spend your entire stage presentation going into way more detail than we really need about the new Assassin's Creed? Great, you showed your new Assassin's Creed. It looks good. I'm sure it'll be exciting to play. We'll find out more details in smaller things. Show us more games. They rarely have more games to show. But could you imagine if EA and Ubisoft and Activision were doing more experimental games that they could say, hey, check out these experimental games. We're trying something fresh and new. That might turn a lot of heads. And honestly, they have a better chance of getting lightning in a bottle when they do that, because they have a big stage. Minecraft did not have a stage. Stardew Valley did not have a stage. PlayerUnknown's Battleground did not have a stage to go, here is our new project, isn't it interesting? It's just a lot of overlapping happenstance that happen to cause those games to find their popularity and become smash hits. But either way, none of those games cost the ridiculous amount of money that companies are spending on their AAA games. If we have reached a point where a game needs to sell over 7 million copies to make money, we've screwed up. Or rather, EA has screwed up because they're the ones making that claim. It's all very, very stupid. And the reality of it, of course, is that it's not really about that, is it? It's about the fact that there's a lot of mobile games that make stupid amounts of money based on their scammy microtransactions, and EA wants a piece of that pie. They want to have scammy microtransactions and make big money off of them. And they want to pretend like it's so necessary. It's not. It's really not. Anyway, that's a whole lot of ranting. Anyone who tells you that that games need microtransactions to be successful, that they're too expensive to make, and that single player is over, doesn't know what they're talking about, as has been proven time and again. Anyway, here is, we're going to take a break. Here is Stir Fry by Migos here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. And when we get back from the break, I might take a little bit of a longer break here just to rest up for a minute before I explode. I think it's time to talk about the thing that has really gotten under my skin this week. So when we get back, we will talk about that. But until then, here's Stir Fry by Migos here at 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay. That was On Purpose by Sabrina Carpenter here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, I mentioned that we were going to get mildly political, as there's something that has definitely gotten under my skin. So, Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, the world's first video game company, one of the names in video gaming, was about to receive a Pioneer Award from the GDC, the Game Developers Conference, a long-running, conference for game developers, where they stand up and they talk about how they make games, their observations in the game industry, what it all means to them. And they have awards that they give to people they feel deserve awards. And certainly Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, would deserve a Pioneer Award. That is, until he was hit with various accusations of quote-unquote sexism. Well, maybe not. Maybe we don't need the quotes, but stuff like, as the Dallas Morning News points out in this tweet, critics pointed to repeated cases where Nolan Bushnell admitted to misconduct. For example, in the early days at Atari, the game Pong was codenamed Darlene after an employee Bushnell called stacked and had the tiniest waist. Okay, so the award was rescinded because of this, and even Bushnell himself has put out a statement saying that he's glad they did this. He says, quote, I applaud the GDC for ensuring their institution reflects what is right, specifically with regards to how people should be treated in the workplace. And if that means an award is the price I have to pay personally so the industry may be more aware and sensitive to these issues, I applaud that too. If my personal actions or the actions of anyone who ever worked with me offended or caused pain to anyone at our company, then I apologize without reservation. Okay, so open and shut, except there's just one little hiccup, one little snag here. No one who actually worked with Nolan Bushnell ever said anything against him. There were no accusations of sexual assault or misconduct from any of the women who worked with him. Rather, it was just people digging up things he said in old interviews and things other people have said about him from history books to say this man shouldn't get an award. Certainly not in this #MeToo environment, except, no one ever said anything negative against him. Yes, he codenamed a project after an attractive woman in the workplace. That is a bit sketchy, to say the least. But, that was also 40 years ago, and it did no one any harm. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is because all sorts of newspapers have been talking about this, about these accusations of sexism against Nolan Bushnell. What they have not been discussing, what they have not been covering, is the actual words of women who have worked with Bushnell and came out in defense of him. And so I would like to give these women's words a bit of airtime, so that way people understand what they think. So, first and foremost is Carol Cantor. These have all been various Facebook and message board posts from these women. Carol Cantor says, I stand by my previous post. There was much that would be considered inappropriate today, but at the time, it was mostly laughable and in poor taste sometimes, but not to be categorized as sexual harassment or abusive to women at the time. We were all encouraged to be social and have fun in our work. Elaine Shirley has said, I worked for Atari from 73 to 99. I was there during the Nolan era. It was the 70s. We had fun. To my knowledge, no one ever did anything they did not want to do. At Atari, there was no hostile work environment. The GDC should ask the women that actually worked there during the time. I support Nolan getting the award. Geez, next they will be pulling awards given to the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and The Who. It was a different time. I said Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin! Word stumble. Still. So that comes from Elaine Shirley. Now, indeed, the work environment at Atari was quite kooky and 70s, we shall say. There's actually a phenomenal documentary on Netflix about digging up the landfill where E.T. was buried, and they talk to the guy who made E.T., and he talks all about the company culture at the time. And it was how a lot of tech startups were, you get a bunch of friends together, you put together a company. It always starts in a very relaxed manner. Lots of people walking around shirtless or in inappropriate shirts, smoking weed, doing drugs, all sorts of nonsense. And yes, there were hot tub parties apparently at Atari. But that was the way it was at the time, and as a lot of people have mentioned, not only was it a different time, no one ever did anything they didn't want to. The last statement is the longest statement and the one I find the most important to read. It comes from Lonnie Reeder, Nolan Bushnell's personal assistant at Atari. And she has said a lot of words. Now, in order to avoid political hiccups, I considered for a minute maybe trimming some of this, but no. No, I will not censor her words. I will read this in full, regardless of who it offends or makes uncomfortable. So, I'm sorry, but these are the words of Lonnie Reeder, Nolan Bushnell's personal assistant, as posted on the Atari Museum group. She says, "So, let's take a step back and look at the overall situation. It started with a 38-year-old disgruntled uber-feminist woman/game designer from Massachusetts running for Congress who had a less than stellar experience in the predominantly male-dominated video game space, resulting in what came to be known as Gamergate. Using the Me Too movement and a moment in time for which she had no first-hand knowledge. And with zero complaints lodged against Nolan or complaints about the work culture by employees at Atari during the time. And based on archival newspaper and magazine interviews with Nolan and others chatting about a work environment, time, and culture that existed 40 years ago. A work environment men and women happily worked in together and partied in together, or didn't party in. There was no pressure and no judgment. An environment that has resulted in decades-long friendships, marriages, quote, little Atarians, business partnerships, and frequent reunions, providing us with amazing memories, and for most of us, spending the rest of our work careers attempting to replicate the magic of the Camelot that we were lucky enough to work at. By arming herself with a topical movement and being personally disgruntled and offended by an environment existing 40 years ago, which she played no part in, an environment she had zero first-hand knowledge of, and intimating those of us who worked with or around Nolan, Al Alcorn, the Jeans, Lipkin and Landrum, Joe Keenan, Steve Bristow, and the rest of Mahogany Row had been sexually assaulted, abused, and disrespected by, in her estimation, abominations of the male species. Yes, based on her political aspirations, personal assumptions, and libelous accusations against a man where no complaints had been raised or filed, she made a big, unfounded noise against Nolan, and the Pioneer Award honor was withdrawn. Atari was a large corporation with many facilities, but I worked in corporate headquarters, interfaced with every department in the company as a part of communications, security, and facilities groups, and in being adopted by the coin-op and industrial design groups. I also spent a great deal of time in the engineering, hot tub, building, which would be the two locations where most of the fun and craziness occurred. From my vantage point and having a first-person perspective of this time and the Atari environment, what has been done to Nolan, falsely mischaracterizing him for a lifestyle that did no harm or wrong to anyone. Nolan created a company environment which opened doors to many women in a field where they were never included before, high tech. Nolan never discriminated on any level and gave everyone a chance to prove their own merits that they could be part of Atari. From soldering boards to building arcade cabinets, drawing schematics and artwork to working on the assembly line. For me personally, Nolan was the final word in my being hired at Atari, my first full-time job after college. He continued his belief in me years later when we founded U-Wink in Los Angeles, where I became an equally compensated vice president. Nolan never profiled a person by their gender as to whether or not they were fit for the job. He based his decision on the person's skill, ability, and passion for the job. Because of that belief, we always rose to the occasion. We were a bonded teamship and a family. Atari also saw a woman, the amazing Carol Shaw, go on to fame. For me, I'm sure for other women who will weigh in, while this feminazi congresswoman wannabe may believe she is doing Atari womankind a favor, in reality she has done us a disservice by creating victims where there were none. Personally, I am extremely angered by her words and conduct in this manner, not just for Nolan, but for the women of Atari, all of us. We all were and remain to this day extremely strong and intelligent women, and there isn't a man who would dare take advantage of us, not if they intended to procreate in the future. My other anger in this callous and unnecessary hurt, I'm sure this matter has inflicted on Nancy and their kids and grandkids. Finally, by not doing their due diligence before terminating the honor, the GDC did a disservice to Nolan, to my fellow Atarians, and to the truth. Nolan was extremely gracious in this manner via his tweet. Hopefully the GDC will right this misstep on their part at some point in the future. Well, those are some harsh words. Also, about the woman in question, I would like to say that we do not know if I personally do not know if she's actually the one who started this mess. I know exactly which woman she's talking about, and that woman is actually getting an award at the GDC, while, Bushnell isn't. And I could say many harsh things about her, but I will hold my tongue. We do not know if she actually started this or is just claiming credit for it like she usually does. Either way, I applaud all of these women, Lonnie Reeder, Elaine Shirley, and Carol Cantor, for standing up and speaking their mind, and I'm disappointed that absolutely no newspapers have decided to pick up their side of the story. That they've only decided to sit there and say, oh, Nolan Bushnell is a horrible sexist and has had his award withdrawn, without saying, oh, by the way, all the women who worked with him have come out and said that it was a different time and they were perfectly fine with him and that he did great things for the industry. So there you go. That is, of course, what has me particularly incensed today. Because really this, I don't even know what to say. Other than the GDC, considering some of their previous awards especially, has now officially made complete fools of themselves. I don't blame Nolan for just backing away from the award. It was a very smart choice on his part because, fighting for it is just going to bring him more trouble. And at this point, I would say that the GDC award is worth nothing, considering many of the things they have done in the past. So, screw you, GDC. Also, while we're doing vaguely political news, I guess I should mention that the sound designer for Subnautica has been fired for making jokes about attack helicopters. And thanks to a mob founded by Reset Era, which is quickly becoming a waking nightmare of the video game industry. I am not pleased with Reset Era either. But I guess I'm getting a little bit off topic. Anyway, that concludes that story. It is now time for yet another break as I figure out what we are discussing next. I think I might have gone through my entire schedule now. Oops. I'll find something to talk about. So maybe slightly long break. So coming up next is Geronimo by Shepherd here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for at least a little more GameBabble Live. Thanks again for listening. That was Desire by Years and Years here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. And welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. So before the break, we talked about the whole Nolan Bushnell Game Developer Conference Award situation. And I decided, you know what? How about we actually talk about Nolan Bushnell as well as some of the ladies we highlighted earlier. So what is the deal with Nolan Bushnell? Did he create the first video game? And this is one of the points of much contention, because the origin of video games is kind of weird. There's been, well, let me look something up. YouTube amusement device. It is amazing how far back you can trace pseudo video games. The earliest known thing that might maybe be considered a video game was never produced, but was patented at the very least in 1947, and that's the thing I had to look up. The cathode ray tube amusement device is the earliest known thing that might maybe vaguely be considered a video game. Before Pong, there was actually a thing called Tennis for Two, which was built out of an oscilloscope at a nuclear power plant or research place, some kind of nuclear place. They were having an open house. They realized that none of the normies would really appreciate what they had, so some guy threw together a tennis game running on an oscilloscope to show to people, and it was dismantled shortly afterwards, though I guess blueprints for it were found. But yeah, after that, there were various networked computer systems at colleges where you would have to, set aside a specific period of time in order to use them. They were giant computers that filled entire rooms, and some people did program early rudimentary games on them, one of the earliest being Space War, which was where you had two spaceships floating around in space around a sun shooting at one another. And apparently Nolan Bushnell did say, hey, how about we take that and we try to make a coin-op machine of that called Computer Space, which came out in 1970. Someone else had the exact same idea with a game called Galaxy Game that also was produced in 1971. So, two different people at least were trying to sell the Space War game that they had in their giant college computer lab and turn it into a coin-op thing, but it wasn't particularly successful. No, Pong is often what is regarded as actually successful, but Pong was not actually created by Nolan Bushnell. It can more closely be credited to Ralph Baer, who recently passed away like a year or two ago. I think 2-3 years maybe. Anyway, Ralph Baer was a electrical engineer / toy maker who had been contracted by the U.S. Army to make something for their soldiers to train their hand-eye coordination in, and he created this thing called the brown box. The Army wasn't all that interested in the brown box, so they sort of tossed it aside, but he had this working prototype, and he decided to sell it to Magnavox, and it became the Magnavox Odyssey, the first home video game system in 1972. However, the Magnavox Odyssey, the original, was super freaking rudimentary. It pretty much just put white squares on the screen. It didn't really have any physics or scoring or much of anything. You just had two controllers, and you could actually move the Pong ball around as well as the paddles. So it was super rudimentary. It didn't even have the physics of how the ball bounced or any sort of built-in scoring or anything. Nolan Bushnell, though, did see this at a conference. They had a electronics show, and he saw this, and he told Al Alcorn to basically do that and make it better. And Alcorn was like, okay, we'll make an actual tennis field, and we'll make the paddles actually long. We'll have built-in scoring, and how the ball hits the paddle determines the way it bounces. And he added the sound effects to it, and that's what became Pong, which wound up being a huge hit. And yes, Ralph Baer did indeed sue Nolan Bushnell over this, and they settled out of court, because yes, Ralph Baer had a guest book with Nolan Bushnell's name signed on it saying, yes, he played the Magnavox Odyssey before he made Pong. But yes, they reached an agreement. Now, Ralph Baer, that was not his only claim to fame. You know Simon, the thing with the 4 colored buttons and you repeat it? Yeah, that toy, he made that. He also made Teddy Ruxpin. So Ralph Baer was quite the genius, actually, because I would say Teddy Ruxpin was kind of creepy and very much ahead of its time. Let's see if I can find some other things he did. Those are his most well-known things, was making Simon, the Magnavox Odyssey, and Teddy Ruxpin. So he made some pretty awesome stuff. Nolan Bushnell, though, he founded the first actual video game company. He turned it into a business. He, made it more than just a couple tinkering little toys being thrown around here and there. Again, Ralph Baer, sold the Magnavox Odyssey to Magnavox, who did a terrible job of marketing it. Because though it would work with any TV, Magnavox generally made it sound like it would only work with Magnavox TVs, which certainly did not help its popularity. Magnavox, of course, thought that it would help their TV sales, and it might have. But, that's the problem with selling your product to a company like Magnavox. They don't care about the success of your Odyssey. They care about the success of their TVs. So, founding Atari, the first proper video game company in the world, kind of meant something. Although before that, apparently it was called, egad, I need to try to pronounce this. Syzygy. Syzygy? Syzygy. That was Nolan's original name for the company when they made Computer Space, and then they found out, believe it or not, they found out that name was taken, so they quietly changed it to Atari, which is a reference to a check-like position in the game Go, which Nolan Bushnell loves the game of Go, and that's where Atari gets its name, which is, very weird, because, of course, Atari, being from the game of Go, is a Japanese word, yet it was the name of an American company, and then Japan would come to dominate the video game industry in the very near future after that. After this, though, Bushnell would go on to found, egad, so many companies. Let's see. Most notably, he founded Chuck E. Cheese's after Atari. And so, he's relatively responsible for both ends of the Five Nights at Freddy's equation. And then, let's see, it says Catalyst Technologies, Venture Capital Group, Playnet/Aristo, U-Wink, Atari SA, Modal VR, and Anti-Aging Games, LLC. He's on the advisory board for that. Online memory, concentration, and focus games. Okay, whatever. And apparently his most recent company is Brain Rush. So he is just founding all sorts of companies. Either way, that is what he did, and as we mentioned, Lonnie Reeder, the lady who had the most to say about Nolan, in defense of him, also worked with him at U-Wink, and mostly she has been credited as his personal assistant. I don't see a lot of other credits for her, but Elaine Shirley, who worked at Atari from 73 to 99, she is definitely listed in the credits for California Speed and Gauntlet Legends. I guess she did something with the PCBs. And, she worked with Atari on apparently a number of games, and then later left and worked on those Ultracade arcade machines. Currently works at Global VR, which makes those big yellow things that you pop down over your head in the arcades. They've been around for a while. Carol Cantor, I can't find too terribly much on, other than she put together a newsletter for Atari. Definitely worked there. But Lonnie Reeder mentioned a Carol Shaw who would go on to some legend. And yes, she worked at Atari and made 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, an unreleased Polo game, worked with Nick Turner on Super Breakout, worked on Video Checkers, Othello, made Happy Trails on the Intellivision for Activision, and a calculator for the Atari 8-bit family, but her biggest claim to fame was the game River Raid, which she made for Activision in 1982. River Raid is a very early top-down shooter, scrolling one, for the Atari 2600, widely regarded as one of the 2600's finest games. So, round of applause to her for that. So, there we go. That's a little bit more about Nolan Bushnell, as well as Ralph Baer, because you got to give him a salute, too. And yeah, Lonnie Reeder, Elaine Shirley, Carol Cantor, and Carol Shaw, who had all worked at Atari, and with the exception of Carol Shaw, the other three had some very positive things to say about their time there, and that Nolan Bushnell deserved the award that he was not getting. So, good times for all. Yeah, I think I will kick you all back to the music while I figure out what I'm going to talk about to wrap up the show. But thank you so much for joining me here on GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. Coming up next, we have Wolves by Selena Gomez and Marshmello. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. That was Wild by Troye Sivan featuring Alessia Cara here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday. Oops, sorry about that. Every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, we have wrapped up the majority of what I wanted to talk about today, but there's still a few interesting little tidbits out there, especially because, I talk a lot about Japanese games, and there are demos on the Japanese store, and I've been forgetting to mention a certain magical Virtual-On. Now, you're probably going to say that's a very strange name for a game. Yes, that is because it is a very strange concept for a game. It is taking the anime, a certain magical index, and mixing it with Virtual-On, which is, of course, a classic mech combat game from Sega. And it's had everyone utterly baffled because the certain magical index fans are like, a certain magical index game. Wait, why are they all in giant robots? This doesn't make sense. Did I miss something? Meanwhile, all the Virtual-On fans are like, new Virtual-On game, finally. What are all these anime characters doing here? It's been very awkward. But perhaps the most awkward thing is that there is a playable demo out in Japan, and it will be hitting Japan very soon. And what makes it awkward is it's single stick, which is, I think that might be sacrilege. For anyone unfamiliar, Virtual-On is a twin-stick arcade game. Indeed, many people would spend exorbitant amounts of money, myself included, to purchase twin-stick controllers, where you have two sticks with a button on the top and a button in front of each one. And it had, kind of tank-like controls, where in order to turn, you push one stick forward and the other stick back, and vice versa. You move them both to the side to strafe, forward, back. You split them apart to jump. You put them together to quick fall or crouch. And then moving the controllers in different ways while hitting different buttons resulted in a ridiculously huge move list. But but a certain magical Virtual-On has done away with this completely. It automatically locks onto your opponent, and you move around with a single stick, such as in Gacha Force or the Gundam vs. games. This is, again, quite striking, as this goes against everything that Virtual-On has ever been, yet at the same time, not too bad. Actually plays very well, and it's going to be one of those things where I need to know what the hardcore competitive Oratorio Tangram players think. Because they're the ones who will tell you about just how big the moveset for Virtual-On secretly is. It's way bigger than you think. And they're the ones who know that Oratorio Tangram is the game to play. Because there have actually been 4 Virtual-On games thus far. There's been Virtual-On Cyber Troopers, Virtual-On Oratorio Tangram, Virtual-On Mars, and Virtual-On Force, and their position is kind of interchangeable. The thing is, both Virtual-On Mars and Force suck. Virtual-On Mars was made for PS4 kind of as a home port of Force, but kind of not. And Mars, on paper, was brilliant. It was Virtual-On with the single-player campaign. It used the dual analog sticks of the PS2 to give you that twin-stick control easily. It was 4-player versus. It had a huge array of different Virtuaroids to unlock, and it moved slow as heck and had a ridiculously simplified moveset, so it felt slow and shallow. Virtual-On Force was quite similar, 4-player only, slower and smaller move list than Virtual-On Oratorio Tangram or even Cyber Troopers. And that's what I need to know. A certain magical Virtual-On is definitely faster than Mars or Force. It feels like it's moving at proper Virtual-On speed, and from what I've played, it seems like it has a decent enough moveset. But I am a casual Virtual-On player. I don't know. But the moveset still feels bigger than Mars and Force, so even if it falls short of the lofty heights of Virtual-On Oratorio Tangram, still better than the previous 2 we got, so probably gonna be worth picking up. I want to get it. I want to get it pretty hard. Yeah, that is a game. I had a lot of fun with the demo. It's just really weird because I know nothing about a certain magical index, and I don't think the character designs are particularly good. I don't like a lot of modern anime. Anyway, yeah, so Compile Heart has just announced that Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1 is getting a PS4 enhanced version called Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1 Plus. To anyone wondering what the heck that means, Hyperdimension Neptunia is, of course, a long-running RPG series basically about the console wars with the different video game companies represented by cute girls. Problem is, the very first Hyperdimension Neptunia game was absolutely abysmal, and everyone agreed on it. In fact, future games in the series make fun of Neptunia 1. Neptunia 1, beyond a shadow of anyone's doubt, sucked completely. So they actually remade it on Vita as Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth, and they later ported Rebirth to the PC. And then they remade the second game and the third game as Rebirth 2 and 3, and those were really pointless because the second and third games are actually good. Well, remaking the second game was good because they got to improve the writing and kick out Nippon Ichi in favor of Red, and Red's one of my favorite characters in the series, so that made me very happy. But the point is, Rebirth was basically, hey, let's make Hyperdimension Neptunia 1 but not crap. And now that's getting a PS4 release, and everyone's, of course, the next question is, so is it just a port of a remake of a PS3 game, or are you enhancing it further? Such as maybe adding Red back in. The character of Red was originally only in Neptunia 1 as DLC, and then the company got bought out by a Chinese company, so they removed her from future games, and then she came back in Rebirth 2. It would be nice if she showed up in Rebirth 1, but whatever. We will see what they do, because Compile Heart is always full of surprises. You never know when they're going to do something goofy. And any Neptunia fans, Neptunia V2R is supposed to be coming out, which is a VR version of Hyperdimension Neptunia V2. That is indeed coming to America. So we will certainly see how that goes over when it gets here. It's been out in Japan for a little bit, been restraining myself from buying it. It is supposed to be just, hey, you can... What V2R is you can basically replay all of Hyperdimension Neptunia V2 with a VR viewpoint, so you can actually look around at the characters. And then it also has these added-in scenes where the characters from the game show up in your room and you hang out with them. So it's kind of like Hyperdimension Neptunia mixed with Summer Lesson with the Neptunia characters. Good times, good times. Sounds like a hoot. That is, of course, where we're at. Also, the game Border Break is finally getting a surprisingly free-to-play home port. Border Break is one of Sega's arcade games. In Japan, of course. I don't think there's any Border Break machines in America. But it is a team versus mech combat game from Sega. It's been out in Japanese arcades for a while, but it's never had a home port until now-ish. The PS4 is getting a free-to-play version in Japan. I see no signs of it in America, but there's a Japanese free-to-play release. And, yeah, the open beta has started, but it is only at certain times. And I just got rid of my thing that tells me when the open betas are. I just downloaded it and tried to play it, but it's like, oh, beta's not up right now. It was the 3rd and 4th, and then they will do it again on the 17th and 18th. And then I think after that it probably just launches. So I'm pretty excited about trying this. It looks like a fun little mech game. PS4s are region free, so just make a Japanese account. It's free to play, so you just download it, and then you hope that Sega might maybe give it a US release? Like they might maybe give PSO2 a US release? No, of course not. Anyway, it looks fun. It looks really fun. And yeah, I think that about wraps it up for today's show. Let me do a quick check for any interesting news. Nope, nothing really new happening. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me for GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. We will be back next Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. with, of course, that before show segment where I talk about how much I hate politics. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you show back up next week. But otherwise, yeah, don't forget that there is a GameBabble YouTube channel that I desperately need to update. I'm trying to figure out a course of action to get a new episode out, and it's being kind of slow. I also need to not be tired and finish up playing Pupil Wandering. I'd love to review that game. But yeah, I've been getting tired very early and getting some actual sleep in recent days, and that's been a mild problem for me. Anyway, once again, thank you so much for joining us here on GameBabble Live. Again, tune in next week, next Tuesday. Look on YouTube for the GameBabble YouTube page, and you will find things there. And, yeah. Now it's time to kick you back to the music here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Here is Drop Me in the Water by Our Lady Peace, here on 89.5 FM. Thank you so much for listening. See you next